All right, good evening, guys. So today we're going to talk about money markets. All right. Now, how I want you guys to understand, the topics that we're going to talk about throughout level one is two sides of the same coin. Okay. Now, what do I mean by two sides of the same coin? Is that in the second and third class, you guys talked about equity and fixed income, right? Talked about equity and fixed income. And what happened? You guys learned about long term, or you learned about capital markets, and then you learned about equity on one side and fixed income on the other side, right? Now, when we define long term, we're talking about 1 year or greater, right? Now, the other side of capital markets is what we call as the money market system. Okay, so money markets, as the term suggests, and I think most of you should be aware of it, is we're talking about we want to we basically look at anything below anything less than 1 year as a money market instrument. Okay, so that's the idea with money market instruments. Okay, is that it's for essentially investors. Okay, or actually let me ask you guys, why do you think money markets exist? What is your understanding of it? Why do you think money markets exist?
So money markets are the part of the short-term short-term borrowing, and
Okay,
mostly the commercial banks and retail banks maintain their liquidity to the money markets.
okay, correct, but what else?
It is
Okay, now
essential
you guys are
because
talking from a banking perspective, but can you guys think from an investor perspective of why an investor would want to invest in money market instruments?
Um,
to get
mostly
a
money market is
short-term loans,
comparatively less risky as compared to other capital market.
Okay,
getting
and
back, getting back high investment.
okay, all right.
moreover we get money in the shorter period of time. That's why we will.
Okay, fine.
We can invest in the various.
Okay. So when you talk about money markets, right, it essentially is for investors who don't want to lock in their money for a long period of time. That's why, so that's more from an investor perspective. But when you talk about the banking perspective and the corporation or the corporates or the large companies, right, it's more to do with managing their working capital, okay, running the business on a day-to-day basis. So that's why the money markets exist. Okay, and like I mentioned before, right, money markets plays a very critical role in the overall financial system, and it's on the other side of capital markets. Okay, and I really want you guys to have this idea very clear, is that when we talk about everything, especially in level one, right, you guys have to understand it as two sides of the same coin. Okay, so we have capital markets, let's say as a coin, and on one side of the coin you have equity, and on the other side you have fixed income. Now, for the capital markets coin, what's the other side of that coin is your money markets. Okay, so again, money markets exists for short-term borrowing and lending, and we define short-term borrowing and lending as anything less than 1 year. So it is as small as, so in terms of time period, less than 1 day intraday, all the way up to 365 days, not greater than 365 days. So intraday is the smallest amount of time, and all the way up to 1 year. Okay, is this clear with everyone about what is money markets and why do money markets exist? Okay, so quickly write this down, and then we'll move on to the next aspect. So how I'll be running this is that we'll discuss it, and I'll give you about a minute or 2 minutes to write down what's notes that have been put up. And when we are discussing, I would suggest that you guys listen to me so that you guys understand the topic, and then I'll give you time to write. Okay. Okay, so finish, and also please let me know once you're done writing. then I'll move on.
Sir, so the intraday trading over exchange is also called as money market, or it
No,
is still capital market?
that's still capital markets. That's still capital markets.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sir, Preeti here. I do have one question here.
Okay.
I didn't understand your concept of coin. How does there are two sides of coin? One is money market and second is capital market.
No, no. What I'm trying to make you guys, so I want you guys to picture this so that it's easier to understand in terms of visually, right? What I mean is visually, try and imagine this is that, for example, you have, let's say, an imaginary coin, and we call that as capital markets. Okay. Now, in capital markets, you have one side as equity and one side as fixed income. Now, what's on the other side of capital markets is money markets.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's more to do with visualization because see, a lot of us learn differently, and one of the ways that I found that a lot of students learn pretty well is if you can visualize this, and obviously coins is very easy to visualize. And when you get stuck in an interview, right? Like students have told me that this has helped them to come out of tricky questions because they were able to visualize both sides of the question basically.
Sir,
Okay. So
why have you written it's for investor who don't want their money tied up for long term, because it's for short term. That is why.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
okay, and further to this, I just want to ask you: can you give me any characteristics of these supporting the statement that it is a flip side of the coin, so that I can understand it better?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, the characteristic, maybe as you have told, that the money market is a short-term borrowing and
Huh.
the capital market is the long-term borrowing. That is the reason we are keeping it on the flip side of
Yeah.
the coin.
So one thing I want to clarify. So when we talk about long term, we're not necessarily borrowing. So only when you talk about debt, you borrow. But when you talk about equity, you're giving ownership. So it's more about the features that you need to attach to the coin. That's what I mean by that. So, for example, the
Okay.
characteristics
Okay.
of money markets would be short term, anything less than 1 year. And it would be for
Right.
investors who don't want to lock up their money for long periods of time, right? So that's the idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Everybody done writing? All right. Okay. I think, well, most have said yes. Okay. Others are done, right? It's just 3 lines. It shouldn't take you so long. Okay. Now let's look at who plays major roles in the money market space. Okay. Now, some of you mentioned, retail banks and commercial banks, but that's just one aspect of the answer. So when you talk about money markets, right, it also includes investment banks because they actually play a very, very vital role in the money market space. Okay, the investment banks as well as central banks. Okay, so when we look at the entire money market space, right, you have your central banks on the top. Okay, then you have your retail and commercial banks, and then you have your investment banks. Okay, so that's largely how the what do you call it, the borrowing lending happens within this infrastructure of central retail commercial and investment banks. Okay, now let me ask you guys a question. So if we take an example of, let's say, HDFC Bank, how does HDFC Bank gives out loans in the market? Or let's say that you are HDFC Bank and I'm a company and I want to take I want a loan from you. So how does HDFC Bank arrange for that loan?
So through the use of government securities and G-Secs and bonds.
Okay,
Treasury bills, commercial
okay,
paper.
okay. What else?
Through the money which people invest in accounts of HDFC Bank.
Okay, so not invest, but largely we're talking about deposits, right? So what happens is that,
Yes, deposit.
yeah, so what happens is that retail banks, okay, or the retail side, okay, let me back up actually. So when we talk about HDFC Bank, right, it's a huge bank and one of the biggest banks in India, right? Now, HDFC Bank has two divisions, the retail side and the commercial banking side. So what happens is that the money is collected from the retail banking division, okay, and it is then sent over to the commercial banking side, and the commercial banking side give out loans, okay. Commercial banks give out loans to all of this, all to companies and maybe to other banks, etc. Okay. Now, for the banking sector, right, loans are a very, very profitable business. Okay. And that is why we have so many NPAs sitting on State Bank of India, Yes Bank, you name it. All of them are sitting on extremely toxic loans because they happily gave out the loans without really, considering other factors, right? But largely within, when you look at the retail bank and the commercial banking sector, right, this is how it works, is that they take money from us and they give that money to the commercial bank side. The commercial bank in turn will give it out as loans to their clients. Now let me ask you guys a question. Would Is your money safe in the bank?
Only
No,
up to 5 lakh.
no, sir. Up to 5 lakh only.
Okay, right. So here's the thing. Yes and no. So to a large extent, it is very, very safe in terms of the probability of the banking sector collapsing, right, is very, very low. And as we've seen with Yes Bank and all of that, right, what will happen is even if the bank comes to the verge of collapsing, the regulators and the government will bail it out because you cannot have the banking sector collapse in a country. Okay. And what will happen is if the banking sector collapses in the country, and especially a developing country like India, we're going to be in big trouble, right? In terms of inflation being impacted, in terms of GDP growth. I mean, the entire economic structure and financial system would be devastated if they allow the banks to fail. Okay, so that's why largely we feel that banks will not fail, and it is true to again a certain extent, not to a large extent. Okay, now, on the flip side, what if a bank does default? Okay, what if a bank does default? Okay, now imagine this, that let's say you worked 20, 30 years in your career, and because you felt that the banks were safe, right? You put all your money into the bank, and let's say 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that particular bank failed in the market or they basically went bankrupt. Will you get, and let's say hypothetically you saved 3 crores or 4 crores, would you get that entire money back? Let's say you saved 4 crores in the next 30 years, would you get that money back?
No, sir.
Yeah, so that is the scary part, right? Is that you work really hard 30, 40 years or 20, 30 years, whatever you want, yeah, and the bank that you deposit all your money just went bankrupt and you lost all your money, and 30 years from now you will not have that energy to work for another 30 years because you'll be old. So the idea is, when you invest in not invest, rather when you want to save your money, right, you don't put everything in one place. You need to actually, as long as it's legal, right, you can spread out your money into various different channels so that if anything bad happens, you're still protected. Okay, so that's the idea with the banking sector. Now, when you talk about the retail, commercial, and the investment bank space specifically, right? What happens is that at the end of the day, a bank, okay, a retail bank, commercial, or an investment bank, right? Their cash position will be of two sides. Either it will be a negative position or a positive position. Now, what do we mean by this, right? When we say negative position, means that their account balance is less than zero. Okay. Now, how can an account balance go less than zero? Maybe the bank on that particular day there were more withdrawals than deposits, or there was a big loan that they had to give out to a client. Okay, so all those factors, or clients fail to pay. There's a lot of factors that happen in the market on a day-to-day basis. So that's the reason why you'll have a negative cash balance on one side, and you can also have a positive balance where you have, let's say, more deposits that came in on a particular day. Maybe a client paid their loan, etc. So when it is a negative and positive balance, right? What will the bank generally do? And they always do this. It's the same across retail banks, commercial and investment banks. Is that they do what we call as interbank lending, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay. Now, can you guys tell me what could happen if let's say at the end of the day HDFC Bank had a negative balance? What do you think would happen?
So mostly the commercial and retail banks move towards the call money and term money for that to
Yeah, no,
maintain
no,
the balance
no.
on the
Before,
basis of London interbank operating rate.
okay, yeah, 1 second. Please listen to the question. My question is, see, yeah, they can do the interbank lending to cover up the shortfall, but let's assume that if, and there have times when I faced this where we ended up having a negative balance. Okay, now what generally happens is that if you cannot do a intraday deal, or you're not able to do any sort of interbank deal with a counterparty, your account balance, if it is negative by end of day, right, the bank is in big trouble. Okay, the bank is in big trouble in the sense that the central bank of that country will immediately, place a call to the bank and to the CEO to find out why there's a negative balance. And what happens is the bank will, central bank rather, will fine the bank, the retail bank and commercial bank, and there's an immediate audit. And if there is something that has gone drastically wrong, and it's like a worst case scenario, there's a probability or a possibility that the bank could lose their license. Okay, now largely this is an extreme case scenario when you talk about banks losing their license, but it's a very, very real possibility that if you don't maintain enough cash balances at the end of the day, right, there is a worst case scenario that you could lose your banking license. Okay, so that is why this interbank lending space exists, and we'll talk about that. But I want you guys to get the idea of what are we talking about when we talk about money markets. Okay, all right. Money markets. So I put it up. Okay, so we're talking about the retail banks, commercial banks, and investment banks, and central banks play a major role in the money market space. Okay, now, retail banks and commercial banks are basically two sides of the same coin. They're going to collect deposit and they're going to give out loans. Okay. And at the end of the day, a bank will either have a negative balance or positive balance. And based on that, they're going to do interbank lending. Okay. And worst case scenario, if a bank, after closing they have a negative balance, right, there are possibilities that the central bank will fine them. Okay, there could be emergency or like on spot audits conducted, and also bank could lose their license as well. So the third one doesn't happen often. That's like a worst case scenario, and that you'd have to be consistently doing something wrong for that. Yeah, yes, Preeti, even government banks, because see, all the banks roll up into the central bank, right? So even if it's a government bank, they don't have any special privileges because they have to follow the regulator of the central bank. They have to follow the central bank rules and regulations. Okay, so is this idea very
Uh,
clear
in a, in
about?
recent in recent news, there was a case of Bank of Baroda whose license was means under scanner because of the because of the bank guarantees which they have given to Airtel and Tata.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that's the like worst case scenario when they do some illegal stuff, right? But that possibility exists. Now, why I'm talking to you guys about this, right, is like when I was in SocGen, my job was to manage the intraday, same day cash movement of all the entities of SocGen Asia. And so we had, for example, we used to, the department that I was managing, we used to manage Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, China, Taipei. So all these countries, they had their own separate rules and regulations, and it was our responsibility to ensure that at the end of the day, right, there was no major impact to any of the bank accounts. Otherwise, that entity, now let's say we talk about Society General Hong Kong. So the regulator, HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, could immediately fine HKMA if we had done something wrong at the end of the day balance. So I've had all those experiences. So that's why I'm telling you guys that, these are the things that can happen. Okay, is this clear with everyone? Yes, is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, take a minute, write this down, and then we'll move on to the next thing. So, guys, the question that's been asked is example of commercial banks. So, see, like I mentioned before, HDFC, for example, right? They have two divisions: a commercial banking side and a retail banking side. So does State Bank of India, ICICI Bank. So all the banks that you guys are aware of, right? They have two divisions: a retail bank, okay, and a commercial bank.
PM. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, Nikhil.
Yeah. PMC bank example can be better to be fit here.
You can consider that as well.
Okay. So just want to know about one thing. Like yes, bank are about to bankrupt. Like the India government has to support the big banks only. The small banks. You say that like PMC and like small banks also not that much supported by the government.
Sir, at the end of the class, if time permits, then can you please tell us about what the wrong happened in ILFS and this Yes Bank case? Thank
Okay,
you.
so guys, what we'll do, right? So I want to get through the topic because we have quite a bit to cover. So all questions related to, let's say, general market news and all that, let's cover that at the end of the class. Okay, so I'll give you guys some time to clarify those kind of questions, but let's just focus on clearing the topic, going through the topic now, and then whatever doubts you guys have about markets and markets and whatever is happening in the world, we can talk about that. That's not a problem. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody done writing? Okay. All right. Now let's look at the next part. Okay, and we're coming back to interbank lending, right? Is now let's talk about the first scenario where the bank has excess money. Now, what do we mean by excess money? Basically, the bank has a positive cash balance. Okay. Now, all banks, okay, retail, commercial, and IB, right? They will never maintain an excess bank balance on their books. Why? Because it is an inefficient way to manage your cash, right? So I'm not talking about reserves, Chetan. So reserves are going to be something different, but I'm talking about, let's say, for example, HDFC Bank, right? At the end of the day, their cash balance in their account, right, is, let's say, 100 crores, or let's say 100 crores. Now, logically speaking, it does not make sense to leave 100 crores idle. When I say idle, basically you don't do anything with the money overnight. So what the banks will do, and this is again the retail, commercial, and IBs, what they do is that if they have, let's say, 10 million, $100 million of money that is in a excess or a positive balance, right? What they'll end up doing is that they will lend that money into the market, okay, and they will keep the account what we call as flat or square. Now, what a flat or square means, right? Basically, it's a positive balance greater than zero. So, for example, like when I was in SocGen and all that, we used to maintain like a end of day balance of $1 million, okay, per account, and for other currencies, different amounts. So the idea was that if I have $100 million, it did not make sense to leave that money idle overnight. So what we used to do is the front office guys used to book a deal where they would lend to somebody else in the market. Okay, somebody had mentioned that, let's say a overnight money deal or a notice money, some sort of cash deal they would have done to earn some sort of money from that lending deal. Okay, so that's what the banks would do if there was a positive balance. And if there's a negative balance, what happens is that the bank, okay, or for example, the investment bank will end up borrowing money from the market, okay, or from another participant who has excess balance. Now, again, why do you need to have, why should you cover your short balance is that when you maintain accounts, so banks actually maintain accounts with the bank, right? So what's going to happen is that if they have a negative balance overnight, the bank will charge them overdraft rates, okay, overdraft charges basically, and that could end up into thousands of dollars per day as a operational cost. So that is why if a bank has a negative balance, right, the bank that has a negative balance will go out to the market and they're going to borrow money from the market. Okay, so that's the idea with the excess balance and the negative balance. Okay, now because of this reason of having a positive and a negative balance, right, is the reason why interbank lending exists. Okay, now when we talk about interbank lending, there are six types or six terminologies that we use when we talk about interbank lending. Okay, the first one is what we call as call money. Okay, now when we talk about call money, you're going to either borrow or lend for 1 day. Okay, so you can borrow the money, but you have to return it the same day at any time. Okay, that's the idea with call money. The second one is what we call as overnight money. Okay, now what is the idea of overnight? Is that you borrow today and you return the money tomorrow. So basically to cover your short position in your bank account. Okay, next one is what we call as a notice money, where you're going to borrow or lend from 1 day to 14 days. Okay, and term money is 14 days up to 365 days. And again, we have to respect the rule of the money markets where we're not going above 1 year. So everything from 14 to 365 is what we call as term money. And then we have weekend money, where you are going to borrow on Friday and you're going to return the funds on Monday. Okay, and the last one is what we call as intraday money, where essentially you borrow the money but you return the money before 2:30 p.m. local time of that country. Now what do I mean by this? Now let's say that you're sitting here in Bangalore, and you are um, let's say working for Society General. Okay, and you have to manage Society General's Hong Kong branch or whatever it is. So by 2:30 p.m. Hong Kong time, you have to return the money to the your counterparty or to even the regulator. Okay, because generally intraday transactions, right, are generally done with the central bank, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. Okay, but now are we all clear about what it means to have a positive balance or a negative balance, and how money moves between the lender and borrower? Okay, they can book these kinds of deals. Now why do you guys need to know these six terms: call money, overnight, notice, etc.? Is that when you start working, nobody's going to write overnight money on the email that you get from a front office. They're just going to write O/N, and you need to know that they're talking about overnight money. Okay, so if you are, let's say, in a team where you are booking in all these transactions, it is your responsibility to return that money tomorrow. Otherwise, that's going to be a problem. Okay, so that's why it's very critical that everything that we teach you in this program, right, you have to understand the concept and the logic behind it, because this is what's going to help you to outperform others when you start working. Okay, is this idea very clear of what is excess money, what's a negative balance, and what are the different types of interbank lending? Yes, no? Okay, take a minute and write this down and let me know when you're done.
Sir, if some bank borrows money, let's say at in the morning 10 a.m. and returns that in, let's say, by 12 noon, then it will come under intraday money or call money.
No, see, the idea with call money is that it can be called back by the issuer or the lender at any time. Okay, but when we talk about intraday money, it specifically has to be returned back by 2:30. So to answer your question, then that would fall under call money.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, one more question. So let's consider a scenario that you worked in SocGen and at the end of the day there was shortfall in the money. So you have to borrow the money only from investment banks, or you can borrow money from their country's local banks like SBI or HDFC also.
Yeah, we can do with anyone. You can borrow the money from anyone in the market. So, for example, if we let's talk about HDFC Bank India, right? And let's say that HDFC Bank has a shortfall. They can do a overnight deal with, let's say, State Bank of India or an IDFC Bank. They can do it with anyone.
Okay,
Hello.
thanks.
Okay.
So I want to ask about the interest rate matter charges on the like where. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Like the interest rates when the bank borrow money or lend money.
Mhm.
So like it differs from the like where the call money or lend money, notice money. So it differs there in different periods.
Yeah, of course. See, longer the and that's what even Chetan is asking is that yes, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, let me. And anyway, we're coming to that. So, if you guys can finish writing, then we'll just talk about the interest component. Everybody
Okay.
done writing?
Like
Done,
any
sir. Done.
bank,
Done.
any foreign bank can take loan from any like if Goldman Sachs in India, so Goldman Sachs can take loan from the any SDFC or ICICI bank.
Yeah, but see, as long as that investment bank has a banking license, then they can do it. Now, for example, Goldman Sachs, they don't have a banking license in India, so they won't be able to do that.
Okay.
So you need to have a
Foreign banks
banking
also can apply
license.
for.
Sorry.
Foreign bank also apply for the banking license in India.
Yeah, of course. That's how they can enter into the FX markets. See, Goldman Sachs is a very powerful organization, and they've been around for a
Yeah.
hundred plus
Right.
years. But just because they're
Yeah.
Goldman Sachs, that doesn't mean that they will automatically get a banking license. Now, you guys have to understand, if you talk about a banking license, you're talking about a retail banking license, and Goldman, they don't want to get into retail banking. It's too difficult to manage that. So, and I've already had those
I think
conversations.
Deutsche,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think Deutsche Bank is also having the license.
Yes, Deutsche Bank has, Society General has. So there are a
Deutsche
few
Bank.
that have have a banking license, but not all of them. Okay. Everybody
Okay.
done writing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll talk about the interest component and all of that now. Okay, Himanshu, not yet. Okay, quickly. Okay, we'll just give Himanshu a minute and let him finish, and then we'll continue. Done? Okay, cool. All right, now let's understand this, or let me ask you guys this question. So, why do you think interbank lending exists, first of all? So, we already talked about, managing the short-term funding requirements, okay? But any other reason why why this interbank lending exists? Anybody have a clue?
I think to create the balance in the banking system.
Okay, create a balance in the banking system. What else?
To earn profit out of the money which you are having in your balance.
Okay, so utilizing idle money. Okay, what else? Okay, additional source of income. Okay, okay, idle money. Okay, okay. Now, I mean, I think all of you guys know this, but I think you guys are not getting the point. Is that not only in India but all across the world, right? The banking sector is the most regulated sector in the world. Okay, why? Because you're dealing with money and also with other people's money, so there has to be a high level of regulation. Okay, so the reason why also this interbank lending exists is that the banks will have to maintain, for example, in India, we call this as the CRR and SLR ratios. Okay, so the same way we have these kind of ratios all across the world where the banks have to maintain that. Okay, so this is also another key component of why banks do interbank lending is because they also have to maintain their CRR and SLR. Okay, now when you talk in India we use the term CRR and SLR, but in other markets, in other countries, they have something similar to this, but there's a different name. Okay, but the idea is the same, is that at the end of the day, all banks have to, if we talk about CRR, all banks have to maintain a certain amount of cash reserves with the central bank. Okay, that is the first criteria. Okay, and the second one is what we call the statutory liquidity ratio here in India, where the banks have to maintain this in their own books in terms of near cash instruments. Now, what do we mean by near cash instruments? Is we're talking about uh, government bonds, money market instruments, extremely safe and liquid instruments that they can easily liquidate in the market to get money into the banking system. Okay, now can anybody tell me why? So I already told you it's more from a regulatory perspective that they have to maintain CRR and SLR, but anybody can tell me why why has it become mandatory? Why are banks having to maintain CRR and SLR? Why should they? Let me ask you guys that. Why should the bank maintain that?
I
So to
think in
maintain,
the
so to
like
maintain the stability of the banking system, if
for
they
the
don't maintain CRR and
liquidity.
whole money, they can utilize it for themselves, and that can result into the bankruptcy of the bank.
Okay. Okay,
Like
to
say
reduce
banking
the risk
system
of
contribute.
bankruptcy, fine. Okay, I mean, you guys are more or less right. There's a term that we use. Okay, have you guys heard of the term "run on the bank"? Run on the bank. Do you guys know what that means?
Yeah, sir. Yes, sir.
What does it mean, Piyush?
So it means run on the bank means every kind of means depositor can ask their money back at any point of time.
Yeah.
And
So
if lots of depositors are asking their money, then that is known as run on the bank.
very good. Exactly. So the idea of run. So run means RUN. Okay. Everybody is running to the bank to withdraw their money. Now, if you guys remember when Yes Bank got into its crisis, what happened in front of Yes Bank branches? Were there one, two people standing, or were hundreds and hundreds of people
No,
standing?
there were queues and queues of people.
Exactly.
Money.
So that is the concept of run on the bank. Now, see, again, these are all worst case scenarios that regulators think of. Okay. Now, when you are in that situation, right, you have, for example, a CRR and SLR where you can liquidate those I mean, SLR mainly, like you can liquidate those assets, or you can end up borrowing from the central bank to uh, meet your depositors' demands. Okay, but you got to understand that if a bank cannot honor our withdrawals, right, the bank is in big trouble. Okay, and that's always what regulators are worried about. That's what the CEO of the bank is worried about, is, hey, have we taken on too much risk, or do we have enough money to manage our liquidity, right? So this is what the focus is on. Okay, so that's the two main reasons why interbank lending exists, is to manage the short-term funding requirements as well as to maintain the CRR and SLR. Now again, I'm telling you guys, CRR and SLR is what we use in India, but you have similar types of ratios all across the world. Okay, now comes to the next point. I think Chetan was asking, what about the interest? Okay, now unfortunately money is not free, right? Money has to be earned, otherwise money would not have any value, right? How many of you would love to get free money? I know I would. Every day if I could get, let's say, 5 lakh rupees, I'd be very happy. Free money where I don't have to work. Would you guys also like that? No. Nikhil, are you a fresher?
No, sir, no, sir. I am currently working
How many years experience you have?
1.5 years, sir.
Sorry?
1.5 years, sir.
Okay, in my book, you're still a fresher. Okay, so so understand, guys, that as you get older, right? 5 years experience, 10 years experience, 15 years experience, right? You just want money to come to you magically. You don't really care how it comes or not, but you just want money to come to you magically. But obviously, nothing comes free, right? But that's something that we can hope for. But I don't know if you guys know about this. Have you guys heard of universal basic income? So this is a new idea that's been about in the last few years, where you know. Western government in India, okay, where they're thinking about, if let's say the government takes care of food, water, shelter, those expenses, then people could be more productive in society, right? You could have, there won't be such a stress on people, there won't be such a stress on the financial system. So that's something that they're thinking about, but it's still very, very what do you call it, at its infancy, right? So but that's something maybe that might happen, but I doubt it'll ever happen in India. There is something like that. I mean, they're planning it, but it just doesn't make sense at the for the time being, right?
I
So
think it's just being implied on Kenya recently.
sorry.
I think it's being implied on Kenya recently.
Kenya,
The
okay.
universal
Kenya, and
basic.
I think some of the
Yeah.
European countries as well. Yeah,
No, not in Iran, but Kenya definitely.
European, not Iran, European countries. Okay, cool. So the idea is that money is not free. So when we do the interbank lending, right, any of the deals, there is an interest rate component attached. Okay. Now, again, the interest rate depends on two aspects. Okay. The value and the time. Okay. So based on these two, right, the interest rates will differentiate. So, for example, a intraday borrow and lend will have a different rate as compared to, let's say, a call money, or as compared to, let's say, a term money or a notice money. Okay, so interest rates will differentiate, and it also differentiates based on the currency as well, right? Because each currency has its own interest rate. Okay, now when we look at, so I put up an example here, right? So when we look, and I think all of you guys should know about the how to calculate interest. How do you calculate interest? Is that principal into rate into DCC, okay, day count convention. I think you guys spoke about this last week, right? So for example, if I loaned $125 million for 3% for 3 days, right? So how does the calculation look? So this is your principal, 125 million into 3%, 3 by 360, right? So the interest that you will have to pay me is $31,000, $31,250 is the interest you have to pay me along, and also obviously you have to pay the principal back as well. Okay, so with all the interbank lending that we talked about, okay, again I'm reiterating, there is an interest rate component attached, and that interest rate will depend on the time period of the borrowing as well as the value of it, and money is not free, and this is the formula that you guys will use to calculate the interest. Now why, why you guys should still be aware of these formulas, right, is systems, right, they have a problem of always crashing. Okay, and you might be asked to, just calculate the interest on a deal, and if you don't know how to do that, right, it looks quite silly, because all of this is pretty basic stuff, right? So it's important that you guys, depending on the job profiles and all that you get, is that you should be able to do it manually. Okay, when I say manually, with, let's say, an Excel sheet or with a calculator or something like that, without relying on your system. Okay, so DCC means day count convention. Okay, so this is what this means, 3 by 360. Yeah. So 360 is the number of days that you're in the year that is being used, and 3 days is the day of the borrowing. Okay. So is this clear, and does this answer your questions about the interest rate component? So again, interest rate depends on the time as well as the value. Okay. And each currency has a different interest rate. So interest rates are not standardized. Okay. All right. Quickly write this down and then we'll move on to the next aspect of it.
Sir, I just want to ask, why CRR? Hello,
Sorry?
hello.
Yeah. Speak up. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I just want to ask why CRR has reduced to 4 to 3% and SLR was 21%.
Uh,
But it is
it's
changing.
your voice is very low, my friend. I can't hear you at all. Can you type in your question?
Yeah, sure, I will write that.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, so good question, Chetan. So here's the thing, right? They actually will not, go out and tell that, or rather, what they do is they talk to each other. So there are platforms, for example, Bloomberg and Thomson Reuters, where they go out, they use those platforms to talk to each other, and it's all done in private. It's like a private chat. So you ping that person and say, hey, you know what, I want to do an overnight deal. What's the rate you're charging me? Okay. So based on that, they go out into the market and they're going to borrow or lend, but they don't go and make like a market wide news or they announce it to everybody. They're going to talk to each other. Okay, basically there's a platform. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, Nikhil.
Yeah, sir. You have taken a DCC three by 360. Na? It has been given to us, sir.
Sorry.
Like DCC, you have taken a three by 360.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the question? I didn't understand. No, so again, it depends, but generally, in my experience, when you talk about money, this interbank lending, generally we use 360. Unless the trader specifies it as differently, generally we use 360. That's the market
Like by
convention.
default, we have to pay.
Yeah, more or less,
Okay.
unless they tell us otherwise. No, Vatsal, no, it's not like that. So 360 days is what we're taking to calculate, and the number of days is what you're going to use. Yeah, Saurabh, I'm coming to your question. 1 second, you have to hold on. Okay. So is this all clear with the DCC and all of that? Okay. And I've taken it as an example. Okay. But largely from my experience, we largely use 360 days unless they specify differently. Okay. Okay. So Saurabh, why is a question? Why do central banks reduce CRR and SLR? Okay. What do you guys think? Why do you think that banks reduce CRR and SLR? Okay. The idea.
To infuse
To
the
give
liquidity in
the
the
banks
Okay, so essentially, when we look
like
at if the central bank reduces the CRR and SLR, that means that the banks have to put less money in. They basically have to put less money stored away. Okay, so they increase the supply of money in the market by reducing the CRR and SLR. Now, if they want to tighten the flow of money in the market, they'll increase it. Now, you guys have to understand that CRR and SLR, right? These are tools that central banks use to fight inflation. Yeah. Okay, so Sunil, when you talk about the legal part about this, right? All of this is what we call, see, all the banks, right? They are already signed agreements with each other that they are willing to do these kind of deals. So you don't have to keep signing the same document again and again. So you sign it once, and it's based on good faith that you'll pay them back. Okay, but yeah, there is a legal aspect to it. That's for sure. Okay, so is this clear with everyone? And everybody done writing? Okay. Now let's look at the different money market instruments. Okay, so largely right now what we talked about was interbank lending and about banks borrowing, lending to each other to maintain, to cover up their negative positions or to lend out their positive positions, and also to maintain the ratios, the regulatory ratios is what I like to call them. Because in India we call them as CRR and SLR, but all across the world, right? You have different types. Actually, you know what? Let me give you guys some homework. I want you guys to find out the different ratios that banks have to maintain in different countries. Okay, so it's a simple search that and if you're good with Google search, you'll be able to easily find it. Okay, but what I want you guys to do is please write this down. Is I want you guys to find out the names of the ratios of Canada, of US, UK, France, Germany, China, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong. Okay, 9 countries. Okay, so find out, but you'll broaden your perspective. Okay, all right. Now let's move on to money market instruments. Okay.
So ERR and SLR are the terminologies used in India, right? So you're asking us to find the terminologies for other countries.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Cool. All right, cool. Now let's look at the money market instruments. Okay, this first money market instrument, okay, is what we call as certificate of deposits, otherwise known as CDs for short. Okay, so when we talk about certificate deposits, again, they are issued for short-term lending and borrowing. Now, an interesting feature. So what we're only going to talk about is the features of these instruments. Okay, is that a CD is used for short-term borrowing and lending, first point. Second one is it's transferable to other counterparties. Okay. So for example, if I own a certificate of deposit, right, I can transfer that CD to somebody else in the market. Okay, that's also possible. And finally, the interest rates, the third point is that the interest rates depend on the value. Okay, the value means how big the CD is and the time of the deposit. Okay, so that's your first money market instrument, certificate of deposits. Okay, the second one is commercial papers. Okay, CPs for short. Okay, now when we talk about CPs, essentially they are issued by high credit rated companies. Okay, now I hope that you guys understand what we mean by credit rate, high credit rated companies. Basically, these are companies which have a very good credit rating in the market. Okay, so a company that is, let's say, a triple A, or triple A plus, or triple A minus, etc. Right? Those have extremely good credit rating. Now, again, what is that credit rating? Basically, it means that a third party, so for example, Moody's, okay, is an organization that gives out or credit rating agency rather. They go out and rate companies in the market, and they give them the rating. So when you talk about a high credit rated company, what that means is that the possibility that the company is going to default is very low. Okay, so that's who issues commercial papers. Okay, issued by high credit rated companies. They are unsecured. Now, why are they unsecured? Because of the previous point, because they're issued by high credit rated companies. Now, would a high credit rated company necessarily default within, let's say, a day or 2 days? What do you guys think? Okay, so we have Crystal in India, right? So a high credit rated company, right, will not default in a single day. Okay, very, very difficult for that to happen. Okay, so that's why it's unsecured. It's a form of a promissory note. Okay, now a promissory note means what? I owe you. That means I borrowed money from you, so I owe you that. Okay, and it is issued in denominations of $100,000. Okay, so each commercial paper. Now, let's say that I want to. Let's say $1 million is what I want to borrow from you. So I am going to issue 10 commercial papers of $100,000 each. Okay. Now, an interesting thing about commercial papers is that they can be issued from 1 day to 270 days. Okay. Now, you can obviously issue it to greater than 270 days, but less than 365. But the only thing is that you need regulatory approval if you're going to issue anything above 270 days. Now, as much as you can, you do not want to get the regulator involved in everything. So that is why most, companies and organizations, right? They generally will issue a commercial paper only up to 270 days. Okay, and then they'll, if they want, again, right? So they'll again issue something for the for another 270 days. So that's how they keep rolling it. Okay, and with commercial papers, there is no interest rate component attached to it. Okay, they're all sold at discount and redeemed at par. Now, what do we mean by sold at discount and redeemed at par? Is that if the face value is $100,000, it might be sold at 98,000 or 95,000. Okay, and but when the investor comes to when the commercial paper is redeemed, the company will pay the full face value. Okay, so that's the idea with commercial papers. Okay, issued by high credit rate companies, unsecured, issued in denominations of $100,000, issued from 1 to 270 days, sold at discount and redeemed at par. Okay, is this clear with everyone? Okay, quickly write this down and then we'll move on to the next set.
Can you please explain certificate of deposits once again?
Okay, so how you can think about a certificate deposit, right? It's kind of like a fixed deposit, but it's not. Okay. Now, the idea with a certificate of deposit, right, is that again, since we're talking about money markets, it's all short term. So the idea is that you go and let's say you borrow money, or let's say you go to the bank and you want to borrow money, and they can issue a certificate of deposit. Let's say, okay. Now, the key point or the interesting point about a CD is that I can transfer it to somebody else in the market. Okay. And basically, can keep on transferring till maturity. And at the time of maturity, whoever holds on to the certificate of deposit, right, they will be paid. That's the idea.
Okay.
You mean to say that if let's say SBI issues a certificate of deposit and it is purchased by SDFC, then SDFC gives transfer it to Axis Bank. Then at the last, Axis Bank has to pay SBI now.
Yeah. So whoever is holding on to the last, basically, see, if HDFC Bank is borrowing money, right? Now let's put it another way. I'm HDFC Bank. I want to borrow, let's say, 50 crores from you. So I issue a certificate of deposit. You give me 50 crores. Now you transfer that to, let's say, somebody else in the class. Okay. Now whoever is holding on to the CD at the time of maturity, they're the ones who get paid. Now let's say that you sold it to somebody else in the market. Okay. Now that person will give you the money. Okay, but at the end of the day, whoever is holding that CD is the one who's going to get paid.
Okay, okay, thank you, sir.
I have a question. So the commercial paper says it's for 270 days, right? So how
Yeah,
much is it for certificate of deposit?
less than 1 year. Anything less than
Less
one
than
year. Yeah,
less
that's
than 365.
exactly.
Example of any high credit rated company in India, sir? Can you give, please?
In India, we have quite a few high credit rated companies, right? I think Reliance has now been upgraded because they've like they're planning to pay off their debt and all of that. But you have quite a few companies which are high credit rated in India. Yeah. So, for example, right, Reliance Industries, right? It has triple A rated from CRISIL, and in short term, it has A1 plus rating. So all this information you guys can easily get, but there's a lot of companies out there. But here's the other thing, right? You should not also wholly trust a rating agency because I mean, a lot of you were in school at that time, but in the 2008 financial crisis, I don't know if you guys have read about it, but even credit rating agencies, right? They played a big role in the 2008 financial crisis where they miss. What do you call it? They missed the proper ratings, or they did not give the proper ratings for mortgage-backed
Standards of
securities and
rating.
all of that. Yeah. Well, Lehman Brothers is the investment bank, but then the mortgage-backed securities that were sold in the market, right? Um, they were not
The
properly. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
credit rating agencies, credit rating agencies missed the subprime loans which they have given to the public.
Exactly. So you shouldn't really trust credit rating agencies too much. Now, I don't know if you guys know this. I mean, you should be aware of it. But now India has come out with its, or not India, rather, it used to be there. It is in the US and all of that. But now in India, we have a CIBIL score, which is your own personal credit score. And I know a lot of you guys are maybe a little too young, but I'm telling you right now, please maintain a very, very good CIBIL score. Otherwise, later in life, right, you are going to suffer a lot. Okay. And ideally, I think most of you are less than 25 here. Yes, no?
Yes, sir, majority.
Majority. Oh gosh. Okay, I feel old. Thank you. Okay. So ideally, most of you. Okay, we have two people. Okay, fine. Three people. Okay, cool. No worries. But well, irrespective of your age, right? As much as you can, right? Please try and avoid taking loans until until you put in a couple of years of work and all of that. Okay, because like why I'm saying this is that a lot of my friends, right, they are so badly stuck in life because they've just taken on so many loans on their head, right? Is that they are in jobs that they don't like, or they're having such a tough time, right? That it's just they're having a very bad time in their life because they have taken on too much loans. Now, in case you have, you only goal in life is to actually clear that loan as quick as possible. And I have a fun story that if we can, we have time, we'll talk about it with one of my friend's friend, what happened to him. Okay, are everybody done writing?
Sir, funny question. If we don't give credit card money back, then it will also affect our CIBIL score.
Yes, yes. Now, see, everything is connected to everything because of technology. So, if you miss your credit card payment, right, it will affect your CIBIL score. Okay. Now, what happens is you might think, well, who cares about CIBIL score right now? But let's say 10 years down the line, or let's say you want to study further, or you want to take a loan, or whatever it is, right? Because you have a low CIBIL score, one is your loan might be denied to you. Second is that they might actually charge you a higher interest rate because of your poor creditworthiness, right? So that's why it's a American system, which I think is a bad system. This thing, um, bad system. First of all, because a lot of Americans have suffered because of that. But that's something that you guys have to be very careful of. So, Nikhil, it's very difficult to correct it, right? So if you have defaulted on a payment, then your CIBIL score will get impacted. Okay, but how do you maintain a good CIBIL score consistently is not only your credit card payments, right? But any loan that you have, you don't miss any payments. That's where it should be. Yeah. So 800, I think, is the best possible score to have. So anything above 740, 750 is good, right? But that's what I'm saying. You guys don't need to be in a loan unless it's a family obligation or something like that. But even then, your only focus in life, if you are working, and I think most of you are working, your only focus in life should be to clear that loan, nothing else. That means if it means that you take a
Mm,
job,
yes, sir.
probably
Okay,
should.
I want to share a story that I worked in Mahindra Finance na, as an internship. So
Okay.
anyone who had less than 650 CIBIL score, the auto loan was outrightly denied to him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and it's terrible not to have a vehicle to move about, right? Imagine using public transport for everything. So, that's the downside of CIBIL, and a lot of people don't understand the long-term implications. But it's very important that you guys don't miss any of your credit card payments or any of your loan payments, because not now, later on in life, it will come and it will beat you up. Okay, and that time it won't be fun. Okay. All right, cool. Is everybody done writing?
So, so I have a question
Sure.
regarding CDs.
Okay.
Yeah, how does this endorsement of CDs works? Like, for example, SGFC issues some CDs to SBI for borrowing some money,
Mm-hmm.
and SBI needs that money in between the term they have lended the
Mm-hmm.
money for. In between the term, they need the money, SBI, and SBI also transfers these CDs to some other bank, let's say Axis Bank. So,
Yeah.
what is this interest occurred out of that period for these CDs will go for?
Okay, so what will
So, I just
happen,
want to
right?
ask that
So
question.
Axis
Endorsement.
Bank, so if SBI sold the CD to Axis Bank will pay them for the value of the CD and the interest that for those number of days they held on to it. Okay. And let's say at the end of the day, let's say HDFC Bank issues it for 90 days, right? And it just moved between HDFC to SBI to Axis. So at the end of 90 days, HDFC will pay Axis Bank directly for the full interest component. But Axis will pay State Bank of India for the number of days they held on to the CD.
Okay. So, SBI will no longer be in between the Axis and
No,
SGFC.
no, no,
Yeah.
no,
Okay. Thank you.
no problem. All right, shall we move on, guys?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to say this again and again, I don't want you guys to get confused, okay? What we're going to talk about now is repurchase agreements, okay? Now, a repurchase agreement is not the same thing as a repo rate and a reverse repo rate, okay? A repo rate is different and a reverse repo rate is different, okay? So please be clear with what I'm trying to tell you, and I'll give you guys an example as well, okay? So when you talk about a repurchase agreement, okay, so another term that we also call it is a repo agreement, okay. So a repo agreement is when a borrower, now listen carefully, a borrower sells a security with an agreement to buy it back in the future, okay. So if I want to borrow money from you, what am I going to do? I'm going to sell you a security, okay, and you are going to give me the money. Now, can you guys think of why, if I have to borrow money from you, why should I give you a security? What do you think is the logic behind it?
To give the assurity of liquidity.
It's gonna be
Uh,
paid back.
Not liquidity. What are you most worried about? So let's say
The
that I
money will
come
come
to
or not.
you, sorry. So let's say that I come to you and I want to borrow money from you, right? And you ask me, hey Rashid, you know what? I have no problem giving you money, but you give me some sort of security that you'll come back, you'll give me the money back, right? So exactly is to avoid default risk. That's why we're doing this. Okay, so I'm going to give you a security, and you're going to give me the money. Now, let's understand what kind of security will be given. Okay. Now, please understand that we're not, so when we talk about security, we're talking about a very safe security. Okay. So equities are not safe. Okay. Now, in your mind, yeah, so basically it's collateral. So according to you guys, what is the safest security in the market? What do you guys think?
Government securities.
Very good, Piyush. Yes. So government securities or government bonds are the safest. Now, why are government bonds the safest? Because the probability of a government defaulting is very low. Okay. So if I'm going to borrow, let's say, some amount of money from you, okay, I'm going to give you government securities or government bonds, and then you're going to give me that money. Okay. Now, I'm giving you the bond because it's to reduce your default risk. Okay. Now, along with the security that I give you something called as a haircut. Okay. Now, what we mean by haircut is that it is so on the collateral that I give you a percentage of that in cash as well. Okay, so if I give you, let's say, an X amount of government securities, I will give you X plus 10%, and that 10% is cash. Okay, so let's look at it in terms of an example. Okay, so you guys can write this down in a bit, but let me create an example for you guys. Okay, so I'm not a very good artist, so I do not have the artistic gene in my family. Okay, so but just follow along. Okay, so let's take an example, right? So let's say that we have Morgan Stanley. Okay, and let's say we'll talk about Morgan Stanley Hong Kong. Okay, and let's the regulator for Hong Kong is HKMA, Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Okay, now what's going to happen is that Morgan Stanley is wants to borrow money. So what are they going to do is that they're going to give HKMA $100 million in government bonds. Yes, government bonds. And what is HKMA going to do? They're going to give them the cash of $100 million. Okay, now my question to you guys is that if you're HKMA and I'm Morgan Stanley, the $100 million you gave me, will that change in value? Does 100 million become 99 million, 98 million, or does it go up by 101, 102? Will that change? No. No, Saujanya, if there's
It will
100 rupees in your
depend
pocket,
on the interest
Yeah,
rate
market.
of government bonds.
hang on, guys, listen carefully. So, okay, there's 100 rupees in your pocket. Will that 100 rupees change? Will go to 99
No,
rupees, 98 rupees?
No,
With
sir.
no, no.
time, of course, they will come down.
Okay, no, but so don't worry about time value of money and all that. This is all too short of a day of worrying about time value. Okay, so in real life,
It
100 rupees stays 100
remains same.
rupees. Don't worry about time value and all that. Okay, so now the government bonds that I give you, will this change in value? What do you guys think?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Why will it change? Because it's a security, right? And securities will keep changing in value. So what am I going to do, me as Morgan Stanley, is that along with the government bonds, I will give you $10 million in cash. Okay, and this is known as a haircut. Okay, is this part clear with everyone? Yes. Now, and I want you guys to, okay, in my classes, right, or in anybody who takes your class, you guys need to think about what I'm saying, okay? And you need to be able to apply the concept because I cannot spoon feed the whole thing, right? Okay, I'll explain again, Chetan. Okay, I'm Morgan Stanley and you're HKMA. Okay, now as okay, let me put it this way. HKMA is a regulator. Okay. Now, why will am I coming to you? This is the question that you guys need to learn to ask yourselves. Is that if I'm Morgan Stanley and I'm coming to you as to you, the regulator, I am in an emergency, okay, or I'm under a liquidity issue, so that is why I'm coming to you as a regulator. Okay, and if you guys remember, we use the term as regulators are the lenders of last resort. All right, so if I'm going to come to you as to HKMA and you guys are HKMA, you're going to tell me that, Rakshit, you know what, I have no problem giving you $100 million. Okay, I have no problem giving you $100 million. Okay, but you need to give me government bonds, okay, because it's safe, and you're going to have to give me a haircut. Now, is this unfair? Definitely. But in terms of emergencies, are people going to be nice to you, or are they going to be taking advantage of you? Well, in my experience, they're going to take advantage of you. Okay, so this is the structure of the deal, of the repo agreement. Okay, now this part, the first thing that we spoke about here is what we call as a repo. Okay, now what's going to happen? Now all these can be done intraday, and we're talking about money markets, right? So most of this stuff from my experience has been done intraday. Okay, now what's going to happen is that eventually we'll have to give the money back, right? So what will Morgan Stanley do, or what will I do, right? Is I will give what? The $100 million plus interest. Why? Because money is not free. And what will you do as HKMA? HKMA, you will give back the government bonds plus haircut. Okay, and
Sir, if
one
haircut is
second, one
getting
second, hold
transferred
on.
again.
wait, let me finish and then you can talk. 1 second. And the second, so the inner circle is what we call as a repo, and the outer circle is what we call as a reverse repo. Okay, so at the end of the day, it is a lending and borrowing deal. So if I'm borrowing from you, I have to give it back to you. So I will give you your $100 million plus interest, and you have to give me back my government bonds and haircut. Okay. Yes, Piyush, you had a question?
Yes. Sir, if haircut is getting transferred again, then what is the purpose of giving haircut in the first go?
Very good question. Okay. Now, like we mentioned, these government bonds, can they change in value? Can government bonds go up and down?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now, let's say that, Piyush, let's say that I came to you and you gave me 100 rupees and I gave you let's say, a piece of paper that keeps magically changing in value. Okay. Now, let's say on a certain day, if the value of that paper goes down to 90 rupees, would I want to come back and take that paper back from you? Would I just keep the money?
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah,
want to do it,
that can
right?
happen.
Sorry?
Yeah, sir, that can happen.
Exactly. So that is why you're going to give a haircut. That will
Sir,
make
so
me want to buy it back.
if suppose the value of the government bond changes, then the amount of haircut which is returned, that also needs to be changed.
No, so generally it'll be about 10%. See, the value will not keep drastically changing because government bonds are not extremely volatile. Okay, it's not extremely volatile,
Yes, sir.
so it might go up and down. But see, if you let's say that piece of paper that I gave you and I give you 10 rupees additionally, now if that piece of paper comes down to 98 rupees, are you still not, aren't you safe?
Yes, sir.
So that's the idea. Okay, now another way to understand this is, all of you guys know how gold loans work, right? So if you go to, let's say,
Yes,
Muthoot
sir.
Finance, right? So in the south, Muthoot Finance is very famous, very popular. And how does that business model work, right? Is that, let's say you have let's say a gold necklace, and when you weigh it and all of that, it's worth, let's say, 50,000 rupees. Yeah, gold is taken as collateral, but will, now if that gold is worth 50,000 rupees, will you get 50,000 rupees, or will you get something more than that or less than that?
No, sir. Around 10 to 15% margin is taken over there.
Exactly. So that 10 to 15% margin is haircut. Got it? Everybody got it? So the idea is the same, my friends, is that, hang on, Nikhil, 1 second. The idea is the same. Okay, when you talk about gold loans and all of that, the logic is the same. Is that nobody's going to give you a loan for that exact value. They are going to give it to you less than that value. Now, let's say that instead of 50,000, they give you, let's say, 35,000. Now, because that collateral is worth more, would you not want to buy it back? Yes or no? What do you guys think? Would you always want to buy that? Yeah, exactly. So when you go and buy it back, will you pay them 35,000 or will you pay them the full 50,000? Exactly. That's the idea with repo and reverse repo agreements. Okay. Now switch out gold with government bonds and haircut, and the logic is the same. Okay. Yes. Somebody had asked a question. I think Saujanya. I missing the thing. Yeah. Yes. Government bonds will always be used as collateral because they are the safest. Okay. Now I want you guys to think about this. Okay. This $100 million, if I'm borrowing from the central bank, whose money is it? This $100 million that I'm borrowing from the central bank, whose money is it?
Banks, sir, banks.
Think a little bit more, Nikhil.
taxpayer
Hello.
of the countrymen.
Very good. It is public money.
Public.
So if public money is involved, don't you need everything to be safe? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So that's why
Yes.
you're giving government bonds, and that's why you're giving haircut, my friends. So is this clear with everyone? Right? And that's why I like the financial markets, right? It's crazy and it's chaotic, but it's also very, very logical. Okay? All right. So let's look at the
Yep.
definition again. So a repo is an agreement that a borrower sells a security, a government bond, okay, with an agreement to buy it back in the future, and that government bond is given to reduce default risk. And a haircut is included, which is the percentage value in the collateral of the market. So generally, it's 10% based on my experience, okay? Because when you look at government bonds, right, they're not extremely volatile, and government bonds will generally not move 10% in a given day, okay? And when we talk about repurchase agreements, it's largely done intraday, okay? It's largely done intraday based on my experience, okay? And repos can be done with the central bank to control the supply of money in the economy and control inflation and deflation, okay? And when, for example, when Morgan Stanley is going out to HKMA, right, it's because there's an emergency situation or there's a liquidity issue in the market. That is why they're doing this, okay? Is this idea very clear with everyone of what is a repurchase agreement?
Just want a clarity.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, you have told me like the RBI, the central bank, the income is the tax which we are paying. I want to took a clarity that we pay directly to the that it goes to directly to the RBI, the tax we pay.
No, no, not like that. You see, understand the concept, Nikhil. It's not that all the
Yeah,
money is
yeah,
going to the central bank, right? But when you
yeah,
look at
yeah.
central bank, essentially, whose money is it? It's
Yeah.
public money.
Because
Now, for
they have
example, if you
different.
talk about
Yeah,
CRR, right? Now, when a bank
yeah,
maintains
yeah.
the CRR with the central bank, whose money is that? Is that the bank's money or the depositor's money?
Depositors money.
That's the logic. Now, let's say even if it's not public
No, that's
money,
fine.
let's say it's not even public money, would I give out $100 million loan to a party that is going through an emergency? Or if there's a liquidity issue in the market, would I even give 1 rupee to somebody who I feel will not pay it back? Or because they're in an emergency
No,
situation, you're not going to do that, right? Right? So,
no.
guys, you gotta understand concepts with me, okay? So the idea
Yeah,
is simple, okay, and the logic is simple, but you guys need to think about it, okay? Is this clear with everyone? Okay,
yeah.
quickly write this down and then we'll move on. And you guys can create a better drawing, yeah. But the one
So
inside the black this thing, that is a repo, and the outside the purple, yeah, I think that's purple, right? That is reverse repo.
it's not necessary they have to do the deal in the like within the that country only. They can do deal with any of the parties.
No, no. So if you are, let's say, in Hong Kong, you have to do the deal with a regulator. That is one thing. Now, you can
Okay.
also do a
Okay.
deal with another financial institution. Let's say Morgan Stanley does with Goldman Sachs, Hong Kong. That's fine, but it has to be
Yes.
within the same country. It cannot be that
With the
Morgan
same
Stanley
country.
Hong
No?
Kong does it with Goldman Sachs New York,
Okay.
because New
Okay.
York will not be open at the time when Hong Kong is trading, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right, quickly write this down and we'll move on.
Sir, I have two set of question. One you may laugh in it. That I was to ask that who invests in government bonds, because last time I checked the 10-year U.S. government treasury yield was around 2%,
Yes.
just 4 or 3 days back. Then who will invest in such a bad security who gives only 2%?
Yeah, so see, the problem what's happened is the US economy, right? It's been badly mismanaged once Trump has taken over as president, okay? and a lot of bad monetary policies have been put in place. So right now, certain bonds, right, also have a negative yield. So that's why largely most investors are not even investing in bonds. But for some reason, so you got to understand one thing right now, what's happening in the financial markets, right, is defying all logical explanation or market experience. Okay. Ideally, the markets should be crashing, but it's still going up and up and up, and nobody has an explanation for that, right? So we have to see and watch, and we have to see what happens. But yeah, right now in the US, most people are not investing in bonds because obviously 2% or even a negative rate, or a negative yield is there. But there are investors, the extremely conservative investors, who actually would invest in it. Now, the idea is that, see, this is a trading strategy or an investment strategy that a lot of people employ. If you have $100 million, most of us would think that, okay, you know what, if I have $100 million, I'd invest 50 million in equity and 50 million in debt. But that's not the right way to manage your risk. Rather, what most Americans do and the HNIs do, right, is that they actually invest 98% of their money in government bonds and only 2% in equity, right? And because, see, $100 million is a lot of money, so you can't gamble with that, putting that 50% in the equity market. So there are investors out there who are very conservative in the risk approach. So for them, they're going to invest in that. Okay.
Sir, complimentary question. Can you tell me about the yield of corresponding Indian bond? What is their percentage return?
Like Indian, you're talking about what's the yield for Indian bonds?
Yeah, 10-year Indian government bond.
Not much. Again, 4 to 5% is what Nicholas is saying there.
I have a question.
Sure.
So repo is having the government bonds as the collateral, but
Yes.
when it comes to certificate of deposit and commercial paper,
Hmm.
what is given, like it's just lending money and getting the interest out of it, right? It
Yes.
is nothing to do with bonds or
There's no
anything.
collateral. Exactly. Exactly. Good point. There
There's
is
no
no
collateral,
collateral.
and I just give the money to them, and I get interest at the end of
Yes.
the period.
Yes.
But I
Exactly.
have a question. For certificate of deposit, there's a formula that I came across, and it was talking about coupon. So does that mean a certificate of deposit also revolves around bonds being given as securities?
It could be, but from what my experience has been, certificate of deposits largely are just to manage your money. So generally, collateral has not been given from, let's say, an IB perspective and all of that. But there could be changes in that form where they could be giving collateral. It could be possible as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So, guys, one thing, when you talk about the financial markets, right? Whatever you think is possible is definitely possible, plus more. Okay. So, from my experience and my understanding, largely for the first two that we spoke about, there is no collateral given. But if there is a requirement, or if a client is adamant that they want collateral, then they might have to give it. Okay. So Preeti, it's not necessarily strictly intraday, but again, based on my experience, we've largely done repurchase agreements intraday. But you can have, because we're talking about money markets, right? So it can be done for longer periods of time.
Okay, so in addition to that question, I would like to ask is that if we are exchanging government bonds, then
Mhm.
the person holding government bond,
Mhm.
they will be getting a coupon also. So
Yes.
who will get that coupon money?
Very good question. So the
Yeah.
regulator, for example, let's say if you talk about HKMA, so let's say that you're HKMA, I'm Morgan Stanley, I give you the government bond, and in that time a coupon payment is declared, right? Now the government will pay HKMA directly because they don't care whether we've done a repurchase agreement or whatever it is. But legally, it does not belong to HKMA because I've given that as collateral. So at the time of them turning the collateral back to me, they have to give the coupon payments as well.
Okay, so it will be paid to Morgan Stanley.
Exactly. You see, because that's not part of the agreement, right? If I'm borrowing money from you, the agreement is I'm giving you collateral and haircut. Now, if there is an investment benefit out of that collateral, that cannot be yours. It has to be mine.
Okay, and in the situation of emergency, if this
Mm-hmm.
government bond is to be sold,
Mm-hmm.
so they will take all the money, like HKMA will take all the money.
Yes, exactly. So when you say sold, what do you mean? Like sold to who?
I mean, if they are not able to return 100 million, so of
Exactly.
course they will have to recover it anyways.
Exactly. So HKMA will go back to the market, sell the government bonds, and hold their haircut, and that's how they're going to recover their money.
Okay.
Okay, everybody done writing? Yes, no?
Done, sir, done.
Okay. Okay, are we clear with repurchase agreements? Okay. All right. Okay, so okay, I want to actually share with you guys one incident, okay? And this is why, sorry, why you guys have an advantage by coming to Marticus and learning from us, right? And I'll give you guys an example. This is a real life incident that happened in one of the investment banks many years ago. Okay. Now, I just taught you guys repurchase agreements, and we are all in agreement that it is something straightforward and not too complex. Yes or no? Right? All right. So this particular incident happened in an investment bank, okay? And what happened was that, see, like how we have a chat, this thing here, right? On this go-to meeting. What had happened was that there was the front office team, the trading division, the middle office team, the uh, bonds team. Okay, there's a in investment banks, they're all what do you call it? Broken up based on product and function and all of that. Okay, so in this group chat, right, we there was a front office team, there was a middle office team, there was a back office team, there was a bonds team, there was a FX team, etc. All the teams, because because these guys have to talk to each other every single minute. Okay, now what happened was that the front office person had pinged in the chat saying that, guys, I'm doing a repurchase agreement. Okay. Now, when somebody tells you this, what should fire in your mind? Okay. So we are doing a repurchase agreement. That means that we are going to borrow money. And that means what do we have to do? We have to lend out the security plus a haircut. That's what should come to your mind, right? Yes or no?
Obviously, sir.
Obviously, right? Like common sense. Yeah, repurchase agreement, I got it, no problem. So in the chat, everybody said like how you guys are saying yes, right? So the middle office guy said yes, done. The back office guy said yes, done. And the fixed income securities team, that guy also said yes. So if everybody says yes, what is your assumption that did everybody do their job? Yes or no? What do you guys think? If everybody says yes, now all of you have said that yes, you've understood, right? Now, if everybody's understood, that means what? You have understood, right? Now, in the chat, if you see that if the front office person says, guys, is the repo done? And everybody says yes, in your mind, what should be the thought? That the repurchase agreement is done. Common sense. So on that day, the all the participants, okay, everybody said yes, and they thought it was done. Then the next day, they all came to office, and the regulator had called the front office guys and basically shouted and screamed at them for a good 45 minutes. Okay, they shout. And by the way, those of you who are very sensitive and delicate and all of that, right? You have to kind of toughen up, okay? Because there is a lot of yelling and shouting and screaming in investment banks, okay? And largely, you're the one who's going to get shouted at, okay? Just a bit of fun, okay? But it does happen if you make a big enough mistake, okay? Um, so what happened was that the next day the regulator calls up the investment banks and shouts, yells, and says they're threatening them to cut their banking license, this, that, like, and the front office guys are sweating. Okay, they're like, okay, we don't know what's happened. Tell us what happened, this, that, and all that. And then what happened was that the front office team contacted the middle office team and said, guys, we just got yelled at by the regulator. What is happening? What is happening, basically? Okay, then what happened was that the teams started reconciling and checking what happened with the repurchase agreement. So what happened was that, yes, we received the money from the central bank, and the investment bank paid the money back along with interest back to the central bank. But what was missing was that the person who was in the fixed income settlements team, the bonds team, forgot to release the government bonds to the regulator. The person forgot to release.
What happened with that person, sir?
We'll come to that. So no, that's not even the worst part, right? So the person forgot, and then when everybody called this person up and asked them, what are you doing, why didn't you release it? The guy was like, I don't know what it is, everybody said yes, so I said yes. And yeah, and that's one thing you have to understand, is that the world of investment banking, right, is very small. If you make a big enough mistake, right, everybody will come to know. When I say everybody, everybody in the world will come to know. Okay, and they were just so shocked that, first of all, the guy said, I don't know what is the I don't know, and I said yes because everybody said yes. Like, what do you say to something like that? And then the person was actually relatively new, and they didn't know what was happening and all of that. But the way the analyst was, the person who said yes, the way the person got it, the way the team leader got it, the way the manager got it, right? I think there are still physical. I mean, they didn't get physically beaten up, but the way they got it from everybody, okay, from everybody, is something that they will remember for the rest of their life, right? So this is why, this is why I've been saying, I know this is my first class with me, and I'll keep saying, is that you guys have to understand concept and logic, okay? And you need to make sure that once you're clear with the concept and logic, you're able to apply it when you start a job and all of that, and not to forget any of the things that have been taught to you, right? And and unfortunately there was nothing much we could do for that person. We couldn't fire that person or anything like that, because that person was relatively new and he had no idea what any of this was. But we did catch the trainer and the team leader, and the way we belted that person, right, like, it brings tremendous amount of joy. Right, it brings, like, we feel happy that we were able to belt somebody like that, right? But and by the way, I'm not a very cruel person, but when you make mistakes, right, i will um, I will make people suffer. Okay. So again, I'm not mean or evil or anything. A little bit evil, yes, but not too much. Okay, but we made that person suffer. Okay. And
So this happened
Hello.
in Sogden or Goldman?
I don't know, I cannot divulge that information. So, but essentially, what I'm trying to
Hi,
get at.
Rakshit.
Sorry.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. You
Sure.
said that the person forgot to release the bonds. So, what were the repercussions of that?
Okay, that's a good question. So, So repercussion from a bank perspective was that the bank was fined $10,000 straight flat out, and team leader and manager the team leader and the trainer were put on a PIP, and all three came very close to getting fired.
Oh,
So
got it.
yeah, but $10,000 was the fine, if I remember correctly. Uh, so I let it slip, but I try and not. I keep things neutral so that I don't reveal too much. But please don't ask me which bank and all of that. I'll just keep it generic, okay? But I hope you guys got the idea. Now, if next time, let's say for example, you join the fixed income settlements team, and somebody tells you, hey, let's say Prabhakar, he's the last on the chat, and let's say Prabhakar has joined the fixed income settlements team. If they say, Prabhakar, you have to manage the repo trades for for us, this is what should come into your mind. Okay, so I have a lot of stories, and as much as I can, I will tell you all of it. Okay, but these stories, yeah, I've tried to make it fun and all that, but the lesson here is very important, right? Is that the person, first of all, said yes for doing something that they didn't do, and they didn't know that they were supposed to even do it. Right? So that's why it's very important from a job perspective, right? That you guys be very, very clear about what you're going to learn here and how you're going to implement that when you actually join. Okay, that's the lesson in that. Yeah. But essentially, the bank got fined. A lot of begging and a lot of apologies were issued, and the two, three people were, severely reprimanded. Like, I don't feel bad, but like it was bad. It was bad the way they got it. Yeah. Yes. 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 Right. So and guys, see, you have to understand one thing is that I don't have stories for every single product, right? So my experience has largely been on the equity side, the FX and money market side, okay, and cash management, etc. Okay, but the ideas that I'm giving you, right, you should be able to apply that to other products as well. Okay, so is this very clear with everyone? Now, could this have been easily avoided?
Yes, sir. I think it is a mistake on the training department, no? Because if they have make him understand और एक तरीके से
Yeah.
उन्होंने अगर उसको सिखाया होता कि this can
True, true. No, but here's the thing, right? One thing I'll tell you guys is that when you join an investment bank, right, there is no pre-process training. There is nobody who's going to handhold you. What's going to happen is that they're going to say, okay, you know what, this is your desk. That person's going. That's what is going to happen, right? But there's not a lot of pre-process training and handholding that happens. Okay, everybody can hear me, right? Okay, so only those two or a few of them have the issue. Okay, can you guys hear me now? No. Okay, so all I'm saying is that the way, so that's why it's very important that you guys, when you join, right, they're not going to spoon feed the whole thing. They're going to tell you that here's your trainer, they're going to teach you about 60-70%, but the rest you have to figure out. Okay, because there's no time, because there's a lot of work, and patience is very thin also. Okay, so are we clear with all of this? So understood repurchase agreements, understood what can go wrong and what can go right, etc. Yeah. Okay. So I don't have stories for everything, but wherever there are stories, I will happily tell you guys. Okay? And then it also kind of gives a break from all the discussion as well. Okay. All right. Now let's look at the final money market instrument. Okay, which is treasury bills. Okay. Now, when we talk about treasury bills, right, this is obviously issued by the central government. Okay. Now, when we talk about treasury bills, and we in this case, right, we're specifically talking about US treasury bills. So even in India, we also call them T bills. Okay, but we're talking largely from the US markets perspective. Okay. So when we talk about treasury bills, this is issued by the central government, obviously. Okay, it's sold at discount and redeemed at par, so there is no interest component. Okay, now these are issued from 30 days up to 180 days, nothing beyond that. Okay, now, the interesting and the key thing that you guys need to know about the T-bill auction process, right? The treasury bills is how they are auctioned. Okay. Now, when we talk about the auction process, there are two types of bidders. Okay. One is what we call as a competitive bidder, and the second one is what we call as a non-competitive bidder. Okay. Now, who is a competitive bidder is basically investment banks and commercial banks are competitive bidders, and they have to bid on both quantity and price. They have to bid on both quantity and price. Okay. And non-competitive bidders, right, are people like you and I, retail investors and individuals, and we only bid on quantity. Okay. Is this part clear with everyone? We'll talk more about the auction process, but is the basics clear about what is a treasury bill? So it's a money market instrument issued by the government, sold at discount, redeemed at par, issued from 30 to 180 days. So there's no 60 days, 30, 90, 120, and 180 days. Okay. Now, when we talk about how treasury bills are issued, they go through an auction process. Okay. Now there are two types of bidders. One is what we call as a competitive bidder and a non-competitive bidder. Okay, a competitive bidder are investment banks and commercial banks, and they have to bid on both quantity and price. Okay. And non-competitive bidders will only bid on quantity. Okay. Is this part clear with everyone? And we'll talk about the auction process and the pricing and all of that. But is this part very clear with everyone? Yes? Okay, quickly write this down and then we'll talk about the auction process.
So basically, these treasury bills are money required by the government, right? So they issue this to get money.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So Preetham means bid only on quantity means only on the number of T-bills that they're going to buy. Bid means to buy. Okay. So when we talk about bid only on quantity means how many T-bills that retail investor wants to buy.
These treasury bills are available every day or just a specific time frame in a year?
No. So they won't necessarily be issued every single day. Okay, they will be issued. What do you call it? Um, they will be issued as and when the government requires it. Okay, but you can always buy treasury bills from the secondary market as well. So we're talking more from a primary market perspective for treasury bills.
And sir, this will come under the debt funding of government, right?
Yes, exactly. Short-term debt.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, let me know when you guys are done.
Yeah, we're done.
Okay. Okay, one more minute.
So the question is, can SocGen or any investment bank can also invest in T-bills of, let's say, government of India or US government any?
Yeah. See, because even banks, so that's where the competitive bidders come in, right? So they also can definitely invest. And actually 98% of the market is actually competitive bidders, because see, when a government wants money, they're not going to ask for small amounts, right? They're going to ask for huge amounts. So obviously retail investors, we don't have that capacity. So it's largely, again, the commercial banks and investment banks play a major role in the auction process as well. Okay, everyone done? Okay, cool. All right. Now, I want you guys to listen to me very, very carefully. Okay. It's not complicated, but if you miss something, then you'll end up confusing yourself, and I have to again like make you understand the whole thing. Okay, so it's not very complex. Okay, so let's look at the auction of T-bills. Okay, so again, we're talking about from the US market's perspective. Okay, so in the US, they have an auction system called as TAPS. Okay, and TAPS stands for Treasury Auction Automated Payment System. Okay, now what happens is that all the bids, okay, will be entered into TAPS. Okay, now what happens is that the first bidders will be non-competitive bidders. Okay, will be non-competitive, means the retail investors. Okay, they are going to put in their bids. Okay, they're going to put in their bids first, and after their cutoff time is done. So let's say, for example, uh, all non-competitive bidders will have to bid from 9:30 to 11, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. So after 11 a.m., the competitive bidders will put their bids. Okay, now what happens is that once the bid has been put into the system, okay, what happens is the TAPS system, okay, will use the discriminatory pricing methodology, where they will look at the bids with the highest quantity and then price. Okay, the highest quantity and then price, and they'll keep allocating that. Okay, and how do we determine the price that non-competitive bidders will pay? Is we will use something called as a stop price, which is the last competitive bid. That is what the non-competitive bidders will have to pay. Okay, now I'll give you guys an example. Okay, now let's say that um, so you guys will have to kind of manage with this on-screen keyboard. This is something's wrong with it. Right? Okay, so let's say the first bidder, right, let's say is a non-competitive, and let's say that they want to buy 100 T-bills. Okay, now let's say the second one is also non-competitive, and they want to buy 75 T-bills. Okay, the third one, again non-competitive, and let's say they want to buy 3 400 T-bills. Okay, now this is what has been put into the auction. Okay, now let's say that the competitive bidders come in. Okay, now let's say the competitive bidder wants to buy, let's say, 1,000 T-bills. Okay, at let's say $98. Okay, another one, the fifth one, let's say, is also a competitive bidder, and they want to buy, let's say, 5,000 at, let's say, 99.75 or cents, whatever it is. and let's say the last bid, okay, is a competitive bid, and let's say that this person wants to buy 10,000 T-bills at, let's say, 99.85. Okay, so this last bid is what we call as the stop price. Okay, the stop price. Now what that means is that this 99.85 is what the non-competitive bidders will have to pay. Okay, so we see the non-competitive guy is only giving quantity and not price. So this is how we determine the price that non-competitive bidders will have to pay. Basically, we look at the stop price, which is the last competitive bid price, and this price is what all the non-competitive bidders will pay. Okay, is this clear with everyone? Yes, no?
Not
Last
clear. I
price,
was not
Preeti.
able to get.
Yeah, hang
Oh,
on, Vatsal, I'll repeat it again. It's Preeti, it's the last price, not the highest price. So, for example, let's say if the last price, let's say is, let's say 97.75, right? So that is what they're going to pay. So it's always, guys, it's the last price, not necessarily the highest price. Okay.
And is it the last price of the highest quantity, or it's just the
No,
last price?
just the last price. So even if I make
Oh,
this as, let's say 2,000, whatever, let's say 1,200, that's also fine. It's the last competitive bid price.
so what is the logic behind it? I mean, people will write only 500 at 96.75. Then
I didn't understand you. Hang on, so we'll come to that. First, did everybody understand the logic and concept of the auction process? And I'll reiterate and I'll explain it again, but at least understood something.
and is this called discriminatory pricing?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
See, because see, in discriminatory pricing, what does the word discriminatory means? What does that word mean? Is that you're giving preferential treatment for one person over the other. You're discriminating that. Okay, meaning that you're going to give the person who gives you the highest bid, right? And that person should get it. Now all of you understand how, okay, let me relate it to something like cricket, right? All of you understand how the IPL auction process works, right? Now if I want a player, if I give the lowest price, will I get that player, or will I get, if I give the highest price, I'll get the player? Exactly, right? So here we talk about discriminatory pricing. We're looking at highest quantity first and then price. Okay, all right. Now listen one more time. I'm going to explain the auction process again. Okay, so in the US, we use a system called as TAPS. Okay, Treasury Auction Automated Payment System. Okay, what happens is that all the bids will be entered into tax. Okay, first the non-competitive guys will put in the bids, and then the competitive guys will put in their bids. Now how does the allocation of the treasury bill happen? Based on discriminatory pricing. Okay, so the tap system will look at who gave the highest quantity and the highest price, and based on that they will allocate the treasury bills. Now how do we figure out what price the non-competitive guys will pay, right? So we'll have to look at the stop price. Now the stop price is what? The last competitive bid price. Now let's say in the tap system there are 6 bids, and the last price, the last competitive bid price is your stop price. And in this case, hang on, because the price is 97.75, that's what all the non-competitive bidders will have to pay. Okay, is this idea clear with everyone?
So can you scroll up?
Sure.
But again, if you look at the description of discriminatory pricing, right, it says that the system looks at the highest quantity and then price and allocate the seconds or something. So
Sorry?
here the definition
Security,
says the
and allocates the
secure
securities.
and allocates the securities to those with highest quantity and price. So the definition says you have to look at the highest quantity, right?
Yes. See, because think about it
But
logically, right? Only when I
yeah,
sell out the highest quantity, or the person who's buying the most, that's how I'm going to raise money quickly, right? I'm not going to be able to raise money from a lot of little investors. Rather, I'm going to raise money or get money from the guys who are willing to buy a lot, right? That's the idea. That's why we're going to allocate based on quantity first.
but in the example that you've given,
Hmm.
it doesn't take quantity into consideration. It takes the last
Yeah,
price.
see, this example is to help you understand the pricing for the non-competitive.
Pricing for the non-competitive. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, so as a non-competitive, right? Whatever is the last competitive bid price, that's what they have to pay.
So, so there must be some power value, right, for just bidding up this treasury bills.
Yeah.
I mean, some standard value must be there, right?
Yeah, so see, that's what I'm saying is that, see, when we talked about this, right, we said that it's issued at discount, right? So what happens is, for example, let's say it's $1,000 treasury bill, okay? So the bidding, you can bid at, let's say, $999, $998, $997. So that's where the price comes in.
Okay, but the bidding will always go up, right? In terms of money, if I'll say the price,
Mm,
bidding will go up because bidding works like this only. If somebody is supplying 99 rupees, you have to
mm.
apply 99.5 or point 0.2
Yeah,
to get the bonds or treasury bills, right?
yeah.
So doesn't it say that the highest price and the highest quantity, no matter the quantity is, the highest price will go allocated?
I didn't understand your question.
Yeah, the bid always says that the highest price must be the price we should lock.
No, no, not the highest price.
Go
No,
higher and higher each and every time.
no. My question is, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the non-competitive pricing, or are you talking about competitive pricing?
Competitors,
Okay.
competitor pricing,
Say that
competitive.
again.
because non-competitors doesn't have any privilege to set up the price, right? So
Yeah,
competitors are the one who set up the price of the treasuries.
exactly.
So my question is, no matter what the quantity is, central government will give the treasuries at the highest price, right?
Yeah, obviously, right? Because see, how else will they raise money, right? Because see, when you look at the government, when they want to raise money, right, it's a huge amount of money. It's not going to be couple. Let's say if we talk about from Indian markets perspective, they're not going to raise like 10 crores, 20 crores. They're going to raise thousands of crores, even from the treasury bill process, right? So it makes more sense to give it to the guys who are planning to buy huge amounts from you. And if they give it at a better price, that's why you want to allocate it to them, right? Because it's competition at the end of the day.
Yeah, but when it comes to selling of the, redeeming the treasuries,
Mhm.
so they will redeem these treasuries in the market or to the government itself.
So generally, they will hold, see, because treasury bills are very safe, right? So generally, most of
Yeah.
the commercial banks and investment banks, right, they'll actually hold on to it because in case there's a liquidity issue or a crisis, right, they can then use the treasury bills to manage their liquidity. But generally, they will not sell it in the market. They will hold on to it and they will give it back to the government and they'll get it back at par value. And that's how they make their money.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
Daniel. Yeah.
So can you tell me like the maximum investors are from the KYP investors or ultra chain investors in the treasury bills?
No, so again, see, it's a huge market, right? See, generally, retail
Yeah.
investors, we don't really much get, we invest in treasury bills and all that. Again, it's again going to be commercial banks, retail banks, and investment banks who play the major
Yeah.
role in their auction process for treasury bills.
Because I talk about the interest process because the retail customer will not get any interest, so he can get a discount and then
Yeah,
after that he can sell it fast.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions, guys? Is this all clear?
And what about the competitors? Like, what do they pay? Like, this is the pricing for non-competitors. How about the competitors?
So see, so whatever price that they bid, they'll have to pay for that. But see, think about
Okay,
it this way, you get millions of bids, it's just going to sort based on quantity and then price. So so whatever is the largest quantity and that price, they'll get the allocation and it'll keep going down. But all the competitive guys will pay their individual prices. Only on the non-competitive, they have to pay the stock price.
got it, got it. Yeah, makes sense.
All right? Are we
Hello.
good with those?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt you, sir. Slight. I want to know, like, from the like basically interview point of view, that they will ask that few examples of treasury bills or the in the global market.
No, so
They
the
can
name
ask.
itself is treasury bills, right? Even in India, we call it as treasury bills. So there is no, they will not, so it's like saying, give me an example of water, right? They won't ask you an example. If they ask you, uh, generally they won't ask stuff like that, right? So because in most of the world, everybody uses the term treasury bill. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but there is three different terminologies. Okay, one is treasury bond, treasury note, and treasury bill. So anything that is a bill is less than 1 year. Okay, a note is greater than
Okay.
1 year and less than, I think, 5 years, and a bond is greater than 5 years up to 5 years and above, long term. But they're not going to ask you an example of a treasury bill because there's no different name for a treasury bill. Everybody calls it a treasury bill.
Yeah, that's the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So notice for above 1 year and less than 5 years.
Yeah, note is, yeah, I think 1 to 5 years if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? So
So, sir, what is the rate of return in these?
Sorry, you're breaking up.
What is the rate of return in these T-bills?
Okay, so again, it depends on the price at which you're buying, right? So the deeper the discount, the more return, but smaller the discount, the lesser the return. Okay? Okay.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, cool. All right. So let me stop your recording now.